Think about the version of yourself that no one ever sees. Not the polished, respectable person you present to the world, but the one who surfaces in your private thoughts, in the impulses you would never act on, in the quiet darkness you keep carefully hidden. Almost everyone carries a second self like this, a shadow that lives just beneath the surface of their good behavior. And here is the unsettling question. What would happen if that hidden self could step out, fully formed, free of all restraint and all consequence? What would it do, and would it still be you? A story written more than a century ago took that exact question and turned it into one of the most enduring myths in all of literature. That story is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, written by Robert Louis Stevenson, a short novel so influential that its central image became a permanent part of how people talk about the human mind. It follows a respected doctor who discovers a way to separate the two sides of his nature, releasing his darker self as a wholly distinct person, only to find that the darkness, once freed, refuses to be contained. Beneath its Gothic surface lies one of the sharpest explorations ever written of the divided self and the danger of pretending we are only ever good. From the beginning, the book studies the psychology of repression. Dr. Jekyll is a man who has spent his entire life suppressing his less acceptable desires in order to maintain his respectable image. The author shows how this constant suppression does not eliminate those desires, it pressurizes them. The more rigidly Jekyll polices his dark side, the more powerful and hungry it becomes, until it bursts out as something monstrous. This is a profound insight that modern psychology would later confirm. The parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge do not disappear, they go underground and gather strength in the dark. Have you ever noticed how the impulses you try hardest to deny seem to grow stronger the more you pretend they are not there? The novel also explores the seductive appeal of life without consequences. When Jekyll becomes his darker self, he is freed from his reputation, his conscience, and the watching eyes of society, and that freedom is intoxicating. He can do whatever he wants without it touching the respectable man he appears to be. The author examines how much of human goodness is held in place not by inner virtue, but by external accountability, by the fear of being seen and judged. It is an uncomfortable question. How much of your own good behavior is genuine character, and how much is simply the knowledge that someone is watching? The story suggests that we learn the truest things about a person by what they do when they believe no one will ever know. One of the book's most disturbing themes is how the dark self, once indulged, grows stronger, while the good self grows weaker. At first, Jekyll can transform back at will, controlling when his shadow emerges, but over time the balance shifts. The darker self begins to take over uninvited, becoming harder and harder to suppress, until the respectable doctor is fighting for his very existence against the monster he created. The author dramatizes a truth about habit and indulgence that feels almost clinical. What we feed grows, and what we starve weakens. Every time the darkness is indulged, it gains ground, until the self that began as a small hidden impulse threatens to become the whole person. It raises a quiet warning worth sitting with. What in your own inner life are you feeding, and what is it slowly becoming? The symbolism of the two characters' physical appearances deepens the story's meaning. Jekyll is dignified and refined, while his darker self is described as smaller, stranger, and somehow deformed, repellent to everyone who encounters him. The author uses this to suggest that a life lived entirely in the shadow self, cut off from conscience and connection, becomes stunted and inhuman. The dark side, indulged without limit, does not grow into something powerful and free. It grows into something twisted and diminished. The story explores how a person who abandons all restraint does not become more fully themselves, but less, shrinking into something less than whole. It is a vivid reminder that total freedom from conscience is not liberation, but a kind of deformation. The narrative structure itself reinforces the theme of hidden truth. For most of the book, the story is told from the outside, through the confused observations of those trying to understand the strange connection between the respectable doctor and the sinister stranger. The full truth is withheld until the very end, when Jekyll's own confession finally reveals what has been happening. This structure mirrors the way a divided person appears to the world, as a mystery, a set of contradictions that do not add up until the hidden inner reality is finally exposed. The author uses the slow uncovering of the secret to show how much can be concealed beneath a respectable surface, and how the truth of a person's inner war is often invisible to everyone around them. There is also a deeply human tragedy at the center of the story, and it is easy to miss beneath the horror. Jekyll is not a villain who set out to do evil. He is a man who wanted to be free of his own contradictions, who could not bear the tension of being both good and bad at once, and who tried to solve that tension by splitting himself in two. His downfall comes from the impossible wish to keep his goodness pure by exiling his darkness entirely. The author seems to suggest that this is precisely the wrong solution, that a whole person must somehow acknowledge and integrate both sides, rather than trying to amputate one. It raises a profound question about what it actually means to be a complete human being. Can anyone become whole by pretending half of themselves does not exist? What gives the story its lasting grip is that the division it describes is not unique to one strange doctor, it is universal. Every person carries within them competing impulses, the generous and the selfish, the kind and the cruel, the disciplined and the wild. The author takes this ordinary inner conflict, which everyone experiences, and makes it literal and visible, so that you can see clearly what is usually hidden. This is why the story has never lost its power. It is not really about a fantastical potion. It is about the quiet, daily struggle inside every human being to manage the many selves they contain. The book invites you to recognize your own divided nature, not as a flaw to be ashamed of, but as the basic condition of being a complex person. The transformation itself carries a deeper symbolic meaning about the human longing for a shortcut to change. Jekyll does not do the slow, difficult work of integrating his desires and his conscience. He reaches for a chemical solution, a way to instantly become someone else and escape the tension of being himself. The author seems to suggest that this shortcut is precisely what destroys him, that there is no quick chemical or external escape from the work of becoming whole. The story explores the seductive fantasy of transforming overnight into a different person, and the danger of seeking change through escape rather than through honest self-confrontation. It quietly asks whether any real transformation can come without first facing, rather than fleeing, who you already are. There is also a profound loneliness at the heart of Jekyll's secret. He cannot share his condition with anyone. The double life isolates him completely, trapping him alone with the truth too terrible and too strange to confess. The author shows how a hidden self, a secret kept from everyone, becomes a prison of isolation. The more a person conceals their true inner reality, the more they become alone, cut off from the connection that might have helped them. The story explores how secrecy and shame feed each other, deepening a person's isolation until they are utterly alone with the thing they cannot reveal. It raises a profound question about how much loneliness is created not by being unloved, but by being unable to let anyone see who you truly are. The story feels strikingly relevant in the present moment, in an age where the gap between the public self and the private self has grown wider than ever. People now maintain carefully curated public images, while their unfiltered selves emerge in private, anonymous spaces where consequences feel distant. The conditions that freed Jekyll's darker self, the removal of accountability and the protection of a hidden identity, are now woven into ordinary life. The author's century-old warning takes on new force in a world where so many people live partly as their respectable public face and partly as an unaccountable shadow self. It invites you to consider the distance between the version of you that others see and the version that emerges when you believe no one is watching. In the end, Jekyll and Hyde leaves you looking more honestly at your own hidden self. It suggests that the darkness within is not erased by denial, but only strengthened, that goodness held in place only by fear is fragile, and that wholeness comes not from exiling the shadow, but from facing it with open eyes. A story that helps you understand the stranger living inside you has given you a kind of self-knowledge that pretending never could. Books aren't just stories, they're mirrors that help us understand ourselves better. Comment below with the book you would like explored next and the hidden part of human nature you most want to understand. If this kind of thoughtful book analysis speaks to you, consider liking and subscribing so more of it can find its way to you. This video uses AI-generated audio and visuals for educational purposes only. This is just one reader's personal thoughts and interpretations.